Bruce Arians had plenty to say about the state of the Buccaneers when he spoke with our own Evan Closky. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Closky at eClosky. WTSP. We are your credentialed members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm the deputy editor over at SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Evan is on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10TampaBay.com. And I'm here with you Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. So for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, and just general thoughts, plus one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Head to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Which Bucs beyond the big four does Evan think need to be prioritized in free agency? And who are some outside names that he's keeping an eye on? All of that is coming up in a little bit. But first, Evan, let's start with your conversation with Bruce Arians. And you had the chance to talk with the former coach, the current advisor for the Bucs. And he's been pretty vocal lately, making the rounds. I know he was on the Ronnie and T Crash show. He's been popping up here and there. And has been really vocal lately about his belief that the Bucs are going to keep both Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. But you guys talked about quite a few things. What were some of the big takeaways and the impressions that he left you with?
First off, he's enjoying retirement. He's shooting his age on the golf course, which is great to hear. I shoot my age in the first 5 holes. So first off, he's really proud of Baker Mayfield. He thought that Baker would come in and have the success that many didn't think he would have, ultimately because of the guy he is. Bruce, when he does quarterback evaluations, which is something he's going to do for the Buccaneers this draft season, he said that hopefully they're not in the market for a big splash at quarterback, assuming that Baker Mayfield comes back, but he is going to do his due diligence. He is going to have input there on the quarterback class, one that he thinks is the strongest in quite some time. I think he mentioned in at least 10 plus years. So he's really excited about those guys, but he does mention that I don't really finish up my evaluations until I get to speak with them, learn a little bit about them, see how they tick. And, with Baker, I think he kind of falls in line with, little Bruce Arians mentality. Their mentalities, their personalities are very much similar. Bruce, as a head coach, is able to let it fly a little bit more than what Baker can do now. I think he's learned from his younger years of just kind of treading water in different directions. But really proud of the resolve of this group. Doesn't see why this team can't be making Super Bowl type noise next year if things fall in their favor. Says he's very confident Jason Light will crush it in the draft like he's done the past handful of years. But ultimately, what stuck out to me was just how much he loves and adores Mike Evans. He can't imagine him being in another uniform. How proud he is of Todd Bowles and how he navigated the season, reiterating that it's pretty tough to come into a situation with a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, and go through that lull and still find your way and get better. And the guys never blinked and never quit. And that's always a good litmus test to see, if the players are still bought in or not. But yeah, ultimately just a lot of, and then of course mentioning the Arians Family Foundation 10th year anniversary. They're putting on a concert March 23rd with Jason Aldean at the Seminole Hard Rock Casino in Tampa. and which you can get tickets to if you go to the foundation's website. So very happy to stay within the community and be around everybody and to help out and to still, be a part of this Buccaneers organization. His title is senior advisor to the general manager. He talked with Jason Light every Monday this season to give his input. He said for whatever that's worth. And ultimately, he's feeling pretty good about where this team is at. And I asked him about if he agrees with Cameron Brate when I spoke with him early in the year of just having 2019 vibes. And he says that there we kind of just needed a quarterback. Everything else was kind of fulfilled in there. But there are some links to the emotions, at least, of getting out of this season and entering next season of where you could go. So.
Yeah, you mentioned that Bruce was talking about how he'll be doing some quarterback scouting and evaluating and those things. I don't know if I agree with Bruce Arians about how strong this quarterback class is, but he knows more, or he's forgotten more football than I'll ever know. That's why he's Bruce Arians and I'm me. But how much pull do you think he has, or how much weight do you think he has when Jason Light's looking at some of these guys and trying to make decisions, whether it be in free agency or be in the draft? Or is it a situation where it's like, all right, well, Bruce gave his 2 cents, but Bruce isn't the one running the team anymore. I have to listen more to Todd and now to Liam and to those guys that are actually having to work with these players. And if they like somebody better, I got to lean that way.
He's an advisor, and all of his word, same thing during the season. He is there to kind of vent, give thoughts, and they will be taken into consideration. Zero pull. But the reason why he's hanging around the Buccaneers organization, why he's doing this, is because he believes he has a foundation of people there who will listen to him and who value his opinion, right? So it's one of those things where, you go back to the scouts, and he's just focusing on quarterbacks. So, with Bruce and quarterbacks, his opinion is valued immensely, right? That's his wheelhouse. So it's not like they're asking Bruce Arians, who do you want at DB here, right? You're going right into his expertise. So the scouts, they come back with all these reports. Hey, this is how we all have the board. And then you can go to Bruce and be like, how's your board look? And, if Bruce, let's just say Bruce has, and this is not what he said, right? I'm just using a complete hypothetical. But let's say the scouts has Spencer Rattler at 7th. And Bruce has Spencer Rattler at 3rd. Well, maybe that's a sign to Jason Light of, let's dig more into Spencer. Let's maybe bring him in for a visit. Let's see why Bruce is so high on him and why we're so low. And let's evaluate this further, right? If they're the lists of the two the same, then ultimately you're on the same track. But I think you use Bruce to really give yourself a bit of a gauge outside your building. I think you always want to kind of see how your opinions lie outside of your bubble, right? Are we missing anything? Are we too biased? Are we too locked into a certain type? And then you allow either Bruce to give you confirmation bias or for him to kind of give you a thought of like, hey, I think we really like, you guys really need to look at this guy. He's 7th rounder, maybe I like what I see him here. And then it kind of tips off your scouts. Hey, let's dig into a couple more games. Let's circle back. Let's see if we miss something. So it's I think with Bruce, it's zero pull. It's more so of a checks and balances. Hey, this is what we like. What do you like, Bruce? Really? We're going to look more into that. So that's, I think that's where he's kind of at in his career. I think and I think he understands that as well, and he just wants to get a little taste of being involved in the organization, the team, and still kind of be around football and understand kind of what's out there. So, it keeps him involved. And I will say Bruce is looking phenomenal shape. I'm really excited to see that Bruce is happy and really enjoying this stage of life after football, and still remaining involved in the Bucs hemisphere, though he wasn't in every day, or kind of like he was in 2022, where he told me I got weaned off, right? I went from head coach and I weaned myself off by being around the facility in 2022 to then not being around a team really in 2023. But he's watching, he's rooting for the Bucs, and he's still leaned on, especially by Jason Light, to really get opinions on, which is valuable.
He gets his football fix without endangering the health, and so that keeps everybody happy. The Bucs are happy, Bruce is happy, and of course Mrs. Arians is happy, which is the most important thing. But Evan, there's obviously 4 key players that the Bucs need to find a way to keep, but who isn't being talked about enough that the Bucs can't let slip away in free agency. That's next here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Right now, the Boston Celtics are favorites to win the NBA Finals at plus 260, while defending champion Denver Nuggets are the favorites out of the West at plus 440. And FanDuel already has odds up for Super Bowl 59 with San Francisco as the favorites at plus 500. The Chiefs are plus 650 for a three-peat, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are tied with the Saints, Raiders, Cardinals, and Seahawks at plus 7,500. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. We have talked a lot on this show, you and I, me by myself, me to the wall, about Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Antoine Winfield Jr., and Lavonte David, and how the Bucs need to find a way to keep all of those guys for next season and beyond. And those have been the primary focus of a lot of these conversations. When we're talking about the Bucs offseason and what they need to do moving forward. But there are a lot of pending Buccaneers free agents. Which two do you look at and have your eye on that the Bucs have to make sure that they bring back?
Well, here is one, which I don't know has been talked enough, but Chase McLaughlin. After the season he had, now he's going to come at a more of a price tag than $1.13 million. But man, how do you not bring him back after that season? It's hard to imagine he's going to be able to replicate that. There's also a reason why he's bounced around a lot of teams. But I mean, he outside of the one doink he had in the playoffs, which is hard to even hate him for because he was like freaking perfect the entire year outside of 2 blocked field goals. You got to bring it back. He's got the leg. It worked out. He's comfortable. Just bring him back. So I think solidifying your kicker is super important, especially when you have a proven option. I think Chase is at the top of my list. It's not like a sexy thing to talk about, but it's to me a necessary one.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the Buccaneers' history of kickers, right? It's bleak. It's bad. They went on a run there for a decade where they couldn't figure out the kicker position to save their lives. And then you have Ryan Suckup, who was really, really good, but didn't have, super deep range. And then Chase McLaughlin, he's coming off of one of the best kicker performances in franchise history. So, yeah, I'm with you 100%. And you would think that me, of all people, the Illinois guy, would be talking more about how important it is to keep Chase McLaughlin, but it's also hard to get away from those those top four, those top tier guys. But yeah, no doubt about it. I'm with you 100%. Chase McLaughlin, one of the better kickers in the NFL, one of the best seasons for a Buccaneers kicker. When you stumble on someone at a position that you've struggled to find a guy for that performs as well as McLaughlin is, don't mess with that. Bring him back and keep that position solidified.
I agree with that. And then my second, I'll say, and this depends because his price tag last year was $1.4 million. And I kind of agree with 1.4, 1.6 in that area. I like him. Maybe 1.75. Aaron Stinney. Not necessarily to be the starter here, but I am of the belief you always you can never have too many DBs and you can never have too many offensive linemen. So I think that you need, a guy who fits this system. He's imperfect, certainly out of the options on that line last year, probably the shakiest right after Cody Malk, I would say. But Malk was more expected year one, got to beef up, got to learn, rookie, yada, yada, yada. Big believer in him. But I think Stinney gives you flexibility, comfort, knowing that you got a guy who not only has played, on a Super Bowl winning team, but he played a whole bunch of snaps for you the year prior. He understands the system. And while you can try to fight for an upgrade, whether that's in the draft or whatever, it does give you comfort knowing that you can play him and things aren't going to go completely south here, right? I mean, it's not that he's a turnstile. You want to upgrade. But even if you upgrade and he's a backup like he was entering last year and then evolved into a starter, that's important depth. And the Bucs were very fortuitous on the injury front with their offensive line, even though Tristan Wirfs is getting an ankle injury, it seems like every year he's got to fight through. But they were very fortuitous on the offensive line. The year previously, they were not. So then go back to the year they won the Super Bowl. They were. So it just, to me, look at the Super Bowl. Look what happened when the Niners had to put Burford in for an injured O-lineman, and then there's Chris Jones just right through the line, forced to kick a field goal, and maybe that's the difference between scoring a touchdown there or and losing the Super Bowl. So to me, again, not super sexy, but it's depth, and it's important depth. It's experienced depth, starting depth, and someone who understands your system. They don't have to get up to speed. So while I know people are out on Stinney, and I am certainly not here to overpay for him, I think he would come back for a reasonable price. And it's nice to know that if you enter the season, let's say you draft somebody, you're going to plug them into that guard spot. It is nice to know, hey, if Malk or this guy gets hurt, we got Stinney. And you don't feel like, oh, the Bucs are screwed, right? That I certainly wouldn't. Like, I think that, like, hey, they'll be able to manage, right? And run what they got to run. So to me, that's important as well.
Yeah, I mean, they've had to ask a lot of Stinney over the course of the last few years. You mentioned, the Super Bowl. He's a Super Bowl champion, and he had to step in and start for Alex Kappa against the New Orleans Saints, and then the Green Bay Packers, and then the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And then, this year we thought the Bucs had a guy over on the left side in Filer. That didn't really pan out. And of course, you shouldn't lose your job due to injury, but it's not like Filer was really, incredible leading up to that point. So
the problem with Filer was initially entering this season, they were going to run up the gut, right? Let's use power, and we're going to just bully ourselves, and we're going to learn to be bullies. And halfway through the season, Canales was like, we are not going to be no bullies. And then it was more of like, elephants in space. We're going to put some people out and, pull and get to the edges and do all these things. That's not what Filer does well. So you had a plan entering the season, fit Filer. Then you reverse course and were like, we are not going to be able to pick up any yards on the ground doing this. So we got to do something else. And that's why the offense elected for a more athletic mine, not stronger, not bigger, athletic. And that was a Stinney strength. It was not a Filer strength. So, yeah, I don't necessarily, Filer wasn't great, as you mentioned, but the offense in the time that he was out, it evolved into something else at a necessity with Stinney coming in. I think they preferred sort of that look than what they had previously. And so, I think in a different offensive scheme, Filer would be fine. It just the way that it evolved, it just turned out to be, he was kind of a square peg in a round hole.
We just need someone to figure out the whole leg transplant thing so we can get Ryan Jensen back out on the field. Those of you listening that are involved in modern day science and medical science, get to work on that.
A very strong niche in his viewership or this listenership, I know.
Yeah, it really is. But you need to have that figured out by June. We need Jensen on the field at the end of July for training camp. But in the meantime, Ryan Jensen will not be on the field. And there are some players out there that are going to be on a Buccaneers field for the first time because they're going to have to sign some free agents from other teams. Who is Evan keeping his eye on? That is coming up in just a moment here on Locked On Bucs. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy and is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, brakes and rotors, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs, and the Buccaneers are not going to try to fill all of their roster holes in just the draft. Number one, they don't have enough picks. Number two, that is ridiculous. You don't want to do that. So there are going to be some free agents that they sign to come onto this team and help this roster continue to compete within the NFC South, continue to compete, for playoff spots. By the way, I mean, the Bucs having the same Super Bowl odds as the Cardinals and Seahawks and Saints, just it feels insulting at this moment in time. But maybe that's the chip that the team has to put on their shoulder again this year. Them.
I will say, there are, when you look back at the Bucs season, they were on. So the reason why that stuff happens is because their turnover differential was very favorable. And usually when you look at turnover differential, that is the one thing that's a variable you cannot predict, and rarely does it carry over season to season. Kucherov is very good at hockey.
Indeed. That is a thing.
So usually when these analytics spit stuff out, it's like, oh, this team overperformed because they got more turnovers. And they gave up less turnovers, and those were the factors that helped them out this year. And we're not going to expect it to look the same next year. So, having said that, Todd Bowles, outside of 2022, where for some reason they couldn't get a turnover for 8 straight, or an interception, whatever it was, for 8 straight games, he emphasizes turnovers. Typically, his teams force turnovers, so it's just a matter of whether they can prevent them. Which is the variable. Baker, there were a ton of interceptions off the top of my head that were dropped by DBs, but I remember that Bears game, right? The first play, it was and he got bailed out and they ended up winning that thing. So I understand it. I also understand it because their schedule is really tough. So that's the other variable too. That you win the division, You got to head to Kansas City. You got to play the Eagles at home. You got to play anyway, you got to head to Dallas. You got to host Baltimore. You got to, you got a great schedule to come to as a fan. It's a gauntlet next year.
They play all 4 teams that were in the conference championships this year.
Home against San Francisco. Yeah.
Yeah. But who do you have your eye on that's going to come in and help this team against that gauntlet of a schedule? Because the Bucs have to bring in guys from the outside. It's just a matter of fact. You can't bring all of your own players back. And at the same time, you got to go out there and you got to make some upgrades and you got to make some changes, or you got to get some better depth. So you take a look at the upcoming free agent pool. Who do you have your eyes on for the Bucs?
The guy, he might be a little bit too much. I'm wondering if I can find I don't know what his cap projection would be, but I really like Bryce Huff from the Jets. I think he's one of those guys where on the Jets, he wasn't the main guy. He flashed a lot, was very disruptive, but because of some of the other star players they have on that side, and they were as bad as the Jets are, their defense was not the issue. And I just think that maybe he's a guy who you can get at a pretty reasonable price that starts to explode when given more responsibility. Now, that could backfire because you could spend a bunch of money on a dude who with more responsibility can't handle it. But, you think back to Shaquille Barrett, right? That was a risk that paid off. Sometimes, I think with those edge guys, part of the game, it's part of the gambling, right? I think, you don't really know. And it is a sore spot. So would you rather draft somebody who you got to really train and hope it works out? Or do you want to get somebody who you've seen have success and know that he can get after it with the hope, with more opportunity, he can do it more? And he's fairly young.
25 years old. He'll be 26 here in a couple of months. So 26 by the time the season starts. But SpotTrack has his market value estimated at $9.2 million. Yeah.
So could they clear that room? Probably. They can get creative, especially if they sign if they sign Antoine Winfield Jr. to a long-term deal, then next year's cap number goes down because they're able to push it out. So there's some manipulation you can do. But if they were to go after that would probably be like the upper echelon, get that they would go after. Even beyond that, maybe I would look at positions like, I know we talked before we started this. Running back is a position you can get for fairly cheap on the open market, whether that's bringing Chase Edmonds back or somebody else. Linebacker and safety are not the greatest this year in the draft, and they are pretty strong needs for the Bucs. I love me some Frankie Louvu. I covered him at Washington State. He has found a lot of success, whether that was with the Jets or the Panthers last year, the years previously. But maybe you can get a pretty reasonable deal with a line. I certainly don't want to spend on a safety. I think you can probably get a safety in the second or third that can start for you next season, who will do a formidable job. Certainly not a position where you want to spend a lot of money, similar to running back. Outside of Antoine Winfield Jr., he's worth all that money. And but those I think are the two that I'm looking at, because I see the impact upgrade potential in the draft not as high. And I think there are a couple of second round, third round linebackers I'd be interested in, some second round, third round safeties I'd be interested in. But do the Bucs want to go after a DB with those picks, right? Do you want to go after a guard, some higher echelon impact players that are tougher to find in free agency when they hit? Linebackers and safeties are a little bit more cyclical. So those are kind of the positions I think that maybe they would munch in the open market. They tried with Ryan Neal, didn't work. Maybe they try something else this year. And I think you can find something on a fairly cheaper end while you hit the draft for what we think and what Jason Light typically does He's going to find an offensive lineman. He's going to find a defensive back. And, they probably want to invest in a wide receiver if they can. I would say also if Mike Evans were to go anywhere else, I would make the biggest play to bring in Michael Pittman. I doubt that the Colts let him walk, but he's a guy who I think is pretty much Mike Evans 2.0. So I think you can plug and play him. We're going to make him the new Mike Evans. But I'm hopeful that Mike comes back, invest in a lower round wide receiver type, maybe bring in a veteran for cheap and call it good for at least this year and maybe revisit in 2025. But again, right, we talk about those second, third rounders. Second round is going to be deep with wide receiver. The Bucs can probably get a really good wide receiver in the second round if they want to use an offensive lineman for their pick in the first round, so on and so forth. So we're going to have a lot of fun with draft season. I'll tell you that, because there are a lot of needs, a lot of different directions to go in.
Yeah, well, and every week I do mock draft Monday, and I should have you submit a Buccaneers mock draft to talk about on that show. But I've talked to the viewers and the listeners about how I'm doing situational mock drafts. This past Monday, I did a situational mock where the Bucs brought back the Big Four and made a trade for Hassan Reddick. So what do they do in the first round if you add that edge rusher? Because you and I think we both agree how big of a need that is, and it might very well be what they target in the first round. So if you go out and you get a Hassan Reddick, well, now where do you turn your attention in the first round? So I'm having fun with those. But there's a lot of different directions that this Buccaneers team can go in the first 2 days of the draft, and then plenty of other free agents out there. And I mentioned last week, Mike Edwards, he's going to be a free agent. Also, Jordan Whitehead, going to be a free agent. Those are two guys that I wish the Bucs didn't have to let go when they did, but opportunity to bring either one of them back to team up with Winfield there. Both of those would be a really good fit. But I do like both of your linebacker selections there. It looks like Luvu's going to be, according to Spot Track, again, those are estimates, but his market value is about $2 million per year more than Bryce is. So,
wow. Okay.
Yeah. And that's even with him being 2 years older.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't think it'd be like that. I had him more 7.5, 8.
Yeah. Which,
okay, well, all right. Well, maybe that's probably a little bit too rich for their blood, but
Spot Track is not the end all be all. I do like their market value tool.
It's a good gauge, so I'm going to lean on I'm going to lean on them. I'm going to trust them on that one of what they think.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Please make sure you are subscribed on the YouTube and on your podcast catcher of choice. Check out everything that I'm doing over at BucsNation.com. Check out Evan on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10TampaBay.com. And in the comments, share your appreciation for Evan. The guy, basically drove 1 billion miles an hour back from Port Charlotte just to be on this show.
I maintained the speed limit.
All, allegedly.
I didn't get a ticket.
So,
that means, right?
Hey,
Donovan Smith can hold all in a Super Bowl, but if he didn't get a flag, he didn't hold.
Exactly. 100%. If they didn't see it, it didn't happen. But out at Port Charlotte, getting ready for spring training, and then make sure that he's on this show for you guys. So please share your appreciation for him. And follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs, and at Closky WTSP. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.